The sun of Aloria rose gently over the shining towers of the royal city. The palace stood at the heart of it with tall walls, golden roofs, and banners that danced in the soft morning wind. Inside, Princess Alira lived a life that seemed perfect to those who looked from far away. She wore bright dresses, studied with tutors, and walked in gardens filled with rare flowers from every part of her world. Yet behind all the beauty, she often felt lonely. The rules of the court were strict, and the people around her spoke with formality, never with the warmth of true friendship. Alira had always been curious about the lands outside the palace walls. As a child, she would sneak away from her guards and slip through hidden paths. Her small steps took her to the edge of the market where traders from many worlds gathered. Humans, aliens, and wanderers filled the streets with laughter, colors, and stories. Among them, one boy caught her attention more than all the rest. His name was Daniel, a young human who had arrived with a group of travelers. His clothes were plain and his home was only a tent by the road, but he had bright eyes and a smile that felt honest and real. The first time they met, Alira had stumbled while trying to climb a small wall near the market. Daniel rushed forward and helped her stand. He did not know she was a princess, for she wore simple clothes when she left the palace. To him, she was just another child looking for adventure. "Are you hurt?" he asked kindly. "No," Alira said, brushing dust from her dress. "Thank you." From that day, they met again and again in secret. They played games in the fields, chased each other through the tall grass, and shared stories of their dreams. Daniel spoke of wanting to travel the stars, to see strange planets and skies filled with countless suns. Alira spoke of wanting freedom from endless lessons and heavy rules. They laughed together, and for the first time, Alira felt what it meant to have a true friend. Years passed, and their bond grew deeper. Daniel would bring her small gifts from the market, a polished stone, a carved piece of wood, or a flower from faraway traders. In return, Alira shared songs she learned in the palace and stories from ancient scrolls. He listened with wide eyes, amazed by tales of old heroes and wise rulers. She, in turn, admired his courage, for even as a child he faced hardships with calm strength. But the world around them began to change. The royal court grew uneasy about threats from distant empires. Soldiers marched more often in the streets, and whispers of war reached even the ears of children. Alira's parents, the king and queen, tightened the rules around her life. She was not allowed to wander outside anymore. Guards stood at every gate, and her tutors followed her every step. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Alira managed to slip away once more. She found Daniel waiting in their usual field. His face was more serious than before. "My family must leave," he said softly. "The travelers are moving to another world. It is not safe here anymore." Alira felt her heart grow heavy. "Will you come back?" Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "I promise," he said at last. "Someday I will return." The next morning the travelers were gone. Daniel's tent stood empty, and the road felt silent. Alira pressed the small wooden carving he had given her to her chest and wept quietly where no one could see. Time moved forward, as it always did. Alira grew into a young woman of grace and wisdom. She studied the history of her people, learned the ways of diplomacy, and prepared for the role that destiny had given her. Yet deep in her heart she carried the memory of the boy who had once been her only friend. His laughter echoed in her mind, his promise lingered in her soul, and she wondered if the stars had carried him far away. Though she met many noble youths in the palace, none touched her heart as Daniel had. They spoke in polite tones, but their words lacked the warmth of true kindness. In the silence of her chambers, she often gazed at the stars through her window, imagining Daniel out there somewhere, growing stronger, facing challenges she could not see. The world outside the palace grew darker. Strange ships appeared at the edges of the kingdom. Messengers arrived with grave news, speaking of a hostile empire that moved closer each year. The elders spoke of preparing for war, though no one yet knew when it would strike. Alira listened, but she also remembered. In her heart, she still believed that promises made in childhood could hold power. She whispered to the night sky, "Come back, Daniel. Come back one day." The Princess of Aloria remained a figure of duty, but behind her calm eyes burned a hope she never allowed to fade. Somewhere, perhaps across the stars, her childhood friend was walking a path that would one day lead back to her. Years passed after Daniel's departure, and the kingdom of Aloria changed with time. The bright colors of the market still filled the air, and the palace gardens still bloomed with rare flowers, but shadows began to stretch across the land. Far beyond the shining towers of the city, an empire grew strong. Its ships moved like dark clouds, swallowing worlds one by one. Rumors traveled from traders and travelers who dared to come close to Eloria. They spoke of battles, lost colonies, and rulers forced to bend their knees to the invaders. The royal court grew tense. The king called secret meetings with his council. Generals studied maps and whispered about defenses. The people felt uneasy even as they tried to live normal lives. Mothers kept their children close. Merchants closed their stalls early, and guards stood watch at every gate. Princess Alira was no longer the curious child who had once run through fields with her human friend. She had grown into a young woman with calm eyes and quiet strength. Her tutors taught her diplomacy, strategy, and the weight of leadership. She carried herself with grace, but her heart still longed for the freedom she once tasted. Often she looked out from her tower window and thought of Daniel, wondering where the stars had taken him. One night, as she walked through the palace halls, she heard two soldiers speaking. Their words were low but heavy with fear. "They say the Empire has crushed another world," one soldier murmured. "Its leaders begged for peace, but still they were taken. And now they move toward us," the other replied. "How long before they stand at our gates?" Alira paused in the shadows, her chest tight with unease. The thought of war frightened her, yet she knew she had to be strong. Her people would one day look to her for guidance, and she could not show weakness. Still, when she returned to her chamber, she sat by her window and whispered into the night, "Where are you, Daniel?" Far from Eloria, beyond stars unseen, Daniel had indeed grown. The boy who once laughed in the fields had become a man hardened by struggle. When his family left Eloria, they traveled to many worlds before finding a home on a distant colony. But peace did not last. The Empire spread its hand there too, bringing fear and destruction. Daniel, young yet determined, chose not to run again. He joined the defenders, training day and night. At first, he was only one soldier among many. He carried simple weapons, stood in the line, and followed orders. But his courage showed itself quickly. He never turned away when danger came. He protected those who could not fight, carried the wounded, and stood firm when others faltered. Commanders began to notice him, and little by little he rose through the ranks. His name spread quietly among soldiers as someone they could trust. Back in Eloria, whispers reached even the palace of a human soldier who fought with unmatched bravery. Traders carried tales of battles won, of enemies driven back, and of soldiers who followed him without question. The stories were told in taverns, in markets, and even in the great hall of the palace. "They say he does not fight for reward," one merchant told a group of listeners. "He fights because he believes both humans and aliens deserve freedom." "They call him the Starblade," another voice added. "A soldier who cuts through the darkness wherever he goes." Alira listened from behind her veil, her heart racing. The name meant nothing to her at first, but something in the story stirred old memories. A human with courage, a man who never abandoned his friends, someone who believed in unity. Could it be Daniel? She shook the thought away, telling herself it was only her heart weaving dreams. Still, when she lay down to rest, she could not push away the image of the boy who had once promised to return. The shadow of war finally touched Eloria directly. Strange ships appeared at the edges of the kingdom's skies. Scouts brought reports of the enemy drawing closer. Fear spread among the people, yet hope also flickered. For many had heard that the Starblade's army was moving as well. Some whispered that he would come to Eloria's aid. Others doubted, saying no single soldier could stand against the Empire. Alira prayed quietly that the stories were true. She had never forgotten Daniel, though years had changed them both. If the Starblade truly was him, then perhaps fate was guiding their paths back together. She stood on her balcony one night, staring at the distant stars, and whispered once more, "Come back, Daniel. Eloria needs you now." At that same hour, far across the void, Daniel sat with his soldiers around a small fire. They spoke little, for tomorrow they would march again. Daniel looked up at the sky, thinking of the world he had once called home. He remembered a field of tall grass, the laughter of a girl with bright eyes, and the promise he had made long ago. His voice was quiet, but the words carried into the night. "I will return," he said. The stars heard both voices, though the two friends were still far apart. War was drawing near, and destiny was slowly weaving their lives back into one. The sky above Eloria burned with streaks of fire as enemy ships descended. Their dark shapes blotted out the sun, and the sound of war drums echoed across the land. The people of the kingdom trembled, hiding behind stone walls and closed doors. The royal guard prepared for the battle that would decide their future. Princess Alira stood on the highest balcony of the palace, her heart heavy with fear. From there she could see the enemy armies marching across the plains, their banners sharp against the horizon. The walls of the city shook with the steps of marching feet, and the air filled with the hum of strange weapons. Inside the great hall, the king spoke to his generals. "We must hold the palace at all costs," he commanded. "If the palace falls, the kingdom falls with it." The soldiers bowed and hurried to their posts, but doubt filled their eyes. The enemy was strong, their numbers great. Even the bravest of warriors feared that the city could not survive such power. When the battle began, the roar of war filled the air. The walls of Eloria shook as blasts of energy struck their defenses. Soldiers lined the gates, raising shields and weapons. The royal guard fought with discipline, but wave after wave of the enemy pressed forward. The palace shook and smoke rose into the sky. Alira stood behind the guards of her chamber, her hands clenched in worry. She could hear the cries of battle outside the walls. She wished she could stand with her people, but duty kept her hidden. Her heart cried out in silence, longing for a miracle. Then it came. From the smoke and chaos of battle, a group of soldiers appeared on the plains. They carried a banner that was not of Eloria, but of humanity. At their front rode a man in shining armor, his movements sharp, his voice steady. He led his soldiers with skill, striking the enemy from the side and breaking their formation. The people of Eloria cried out in hope as the tide of battle began to turn. On the balcony, Alira leaned forward, her breath caught in her throat. The leader of the human soldiers moved like a figure from legend. Every strike of his weapon cut through enemy ranks, every command rallied his allies. He did not retreat, he did not falter, and wherever he stood the enemy broke apart. "Who is he?" Alira whispered. Her guard answered. "They call him the Starblade, Princess. A human commander who has fought many battles against the Empire. He is said to be fearless, and his soldiers follow him without question." Alira's eyes stayed fixed on the figure below. Something about the way he moved, the way he carried himself, stirred a memory deep within her, yet his face was hidden beneath the silver helm he wore, and she could not see his features. Still, her heart beat faster as if she already knew. The battle raged on. The Starblade's forces struck with precision, cutting deep into the enemy lines. Elorian soldiers, who had nearly lost hope, rallied at his side. Together they pushed back against the invaders. The city that seemed doomed only moments before now stood with new strength. Hours passed before the clash finally began to fade. The enemy, realizing their lines were broken, pulled back into retreat. Their ships rose into the sky, leaving behind wreckage and silence. Cheers rose across the city as the people realized they had survived. The king himself came out to greet the human commander. From the palace steps he called, "Warrior of humanity, you have saved our kingdom. Tell us your name, so that all of Eloria may honor it." The Starblade bowed low, his silver helm still hiding his face. His voice was calm but humble. "My name is not important, my king. I fight not for titles but for freedom. Your people are safe tonight, but the Empire will return. We must be ready." The king nodded with respect. "Then you shall rest in the palace tonight. Tomorrow we will plan together." The Starblade accepted, and his soldiers were welcomed within the city walls. Songs of hope spread through the streets, for the people believed a savior had come. That night Alira walked quietly through the palace halls, her mind full of questions. She longed to see the commander's face, to know if her heart was right. She remembered the laughter of a boy in the fields, the promise whispered under the stars. Could it be him? From a shadowed corridor she caught sight of the commander as he removed his silver helm. For a brief moment she saw his face lit by the glow of torches. Her heart stopped. It was Daniel. The boy she had once known was now the heroic soldier who had saved her world. Alira gasped softly and pressed her hand against her lips. She could not speak, could not move. Memories of childhood rushed back like a flood, and with them came a new realization. The friend she had lost was not only alive but had returned as the hero her people now praised. Yet Daniel did not notice her. He spoke with his officers, his voice calm and steady. He looked older, stronger, and burdened with responsibility. To the world he was the Starblade, but to Alira he was still the boy who had promised to return. That night she returned to her chamber, her heart caught between joy and sorrow. Joy that Daniel lived and had become so great. Sorrow that he now seemed so far from the boy she had once known. She lay awake under the stars, whispering his name. Daniel. The morning after the battle, the city of Eloria woke to a new sense of hope. The streets that had once echoed with fear now rang with voices of celebration. People carried flowers to the gates, singing songs of thanks to the human commander who had saved them. Children ran through the alleys holding makeshift flags, shouting the name Starblade. For the first time in many months, the kingdom felt safe. Inside the palace, the air was different as well. Servants moved quickly to prepare a feast. Nobles dressed in their finest robes, eager to meet the hero. The king ordered the great hall to be opened and filled with light. It was to be a day of honor, a day when Eloria would bow to the courage of one soldier who had turned the tide of war. Princess Alira stood at her mirror as her attendants braided her hair and placed a crown of silver leaves upon her head. She nodded politely at their compliments, but her thoughts were far away. The vision of Daniel's face the night before had not left her. She could still see the lines of strength carved into his features, the quiet fire in his eyes. She had wished for his return for so many years, and now that he was here, she could hardly believe it. When the feast began, the great hall filled with light and music. Musicians played soft melodies, long tables overflowed with food, and nobles gathered in groups speaking with excitement. Then the sound of trumpets echoed, and the human commander entered. Daniel walked at the front of his soldiers wearing armor polished to a silver glow. His steps were steady, his expression calm. The crowd cheered, and the king rose from his throne. Starblade, the king said, raising his hand for silence. You are the reason Eloria stands today. Without you, the palace would have fallen. Without you, our people would be in chains. We owe you more than words can say. Daniel bowed deeply. Your Majesty, I did only what duty required. My men fought bravely, and they deserve honor as much as I. The crowd murmured with respect at his humility. But the king was not finished. You have given us victory. Now remove your helm so all may see the face of the one who has saved our world. For a moment Daniel hesitated. He had worn the helm through many battles, and it had become a shield not only for his head but for his identity. Yet he could not deny the request of a king. Slowly he lifted the silver helm and set it under his arm. Gasps filled the hall. The nobles leaned forward, the people whispered, and Alira's heart pounded in her chest. There was no doubt now. It was Daniel. The boy she had played with in the fields, the friend who had once promised to return, now stood before her as the Starblade. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She watched him with wide eyes as he bowed once more before the throne. I am Daniel, he said simply, a soldier of humanity. I stand with Eloria in this fight. The hall erupted with cheers. The people shouted his name, and the sound shook the walls. The king raised his hand again, smiling with pride. Then let it be known across the stars, he declared, that Daniel the Starblade is a hero of Eloria. He will be remembered in our songs and our history. Alira's eyes never left him. She felt joy swelling in her chest, but also sorrow. Daniel stood proud, but he spoke to the king as if she were not there, as if their shared past was only a forgotten dream. He looked every bit the soldier he had become, distant and untouchable. Later that evening, as the feast continued, Alira slipped quietly into the palace gardens. The night air was cool, the stars bright above the tall trees. She walked slowly, her thoughts tangled. She longed to speak to Daniel, to remind him of who she was, yet doubt held her back. Would he even remember? Would he care? As she reached the fountain at the garden's center, she heard footsteps. She turned and saw him standing there. Daniel had left the hall, choosing quiet over celebration. His helm was gone, and his face was bare in the moonlight. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Then Alira whispered, Daniel. He froze, his eyes widening. How do you know my name? She stepped closer, her voice trembling. Because I have not forgotten. Do you remember the fields beyond the market? The girl who climbed walls she could not reach? The one who made you promise to return? Recognition dawned slowly on his face. His eyes softened, and a faint smile touched his lips. Alira, he said quietly. It was you. Tears filled her eyes, but they were tears of joy. I thought I lost you forever. Daniel looked down for a moment, his voice low. I thought the same, but promises have a way of finding their path. They stood together in silence, the sound of the fountain filling the air. The weight of years between them faded, replaced by the bond that had never truly broken. The princess and the soldier, once children who laughed in the fields, were now grown, their paths joined again by fate. Yet even in that moment of reunion, they both knew the war was not over. Darkness still waited beyond the stars, but for now, they stood together under the night sky, and for the first time in many years, Alira felt whole again. The night after the great feast, silence settled over the palace. Lanterns flickered in the halls, and the sound of music slowly faded as nobles returned to their chambers. The gardens glowed softly under the moonlight, and the fountain's song echoed across the quiet paths. Princess Alira stood near the old stone bench where she had spoken with Daniel only hours before. Her heart still raced from their meeting. She had seen the recognition in his eyes, the spark of memory that tied them back to the days of their childhood. Yet so many years had passed, and the boy she remembered was now a soldier with burdens she could hardly imagine. Daniel arrived quietly, his footsteps soft on the garden path. He carried no armor, no weapon, only the weight of his presence. When Alira turned to him, she saw both the man he had become and the boy she once knew. "You came," she whispered. "I had to," Daniel replied. "I could not leave without speaking to you again." They sat together on the stone bench, the fountain's gentle spray misting the air around them. For a moment neither spoke. They simply listened to the night, letting the years of silence settle between them. At last Alira broke the stillness. "Do you remember the fields outside the market?" she asked softly. "The games we played, the stories we shared?" Daniel smiled faintly, his eyes distant. "I remember. I remember you trying to climb walls too tall for you. I remember you laughing when I fell in the grass. I remember the promise I made before I left." Alira's lips curved into a gentle smile. "I waited for that promise. I thought perhaps you had forgotten." "Never," Daniel said firmly. "Through every battle, every long march across strange worlds, I carried that memory. It gave me strength when I felt weak. It reminded me of who I wanted to be." Alira's eyes softened. "And now you are a hero. The people call you the Starblade. They cheer your name as if you were born for greatness." Daniel shook his head slowly. "A hero is only a story told by others. I am just a soldier who refused to turn away. I have seen worlds fall, Alira. I have seen people cry out for help, and I could not stand still. If that makes me a hero in their eyes, then so be it. But in my heart, I am still the boy who played in the fields with you." Her breath caught at his words. For all his strength, his voice carried a quiet truth that touched her deeply. She reached for the small wooden carving he had given her as a child, which she had kept hidden all these years. She held it out to him in her hand. "Do you remember this?" she asked. Daniel looked down, his eyes widening. He touched the carving gently, his voice almost breaking. "You kept it." "Of course," Alira whispered. "It was the only piece of you I had. When the days grew dark, I held it close and prayed you were still alive." Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at her again. "I was alive, but not unchanged. War takes pieces from you, Alira. It takes your sleep, your peace, sometimes even your hope. But the memory of you kept me whole. I knew one day I would return." For a while they spoke of simpler times. Alira told him of her studies in the palace, the endless lessons, the weight of duty pressing on her shoulders. Daniel told her of the stars he had traveled, the comrades he had lost, and the victories they had won. Their voices carried sadness, but also comfort. For in each other's words they found the thread of the bond they once shared. Yet outside the garden walls, whispers were already spreading. The nobles spoke of the Starblade with admiration, but also with suspicion. To them he was a foreign soldier, a human with no royal blood. They praised his bravery, but doubted his place near the princess. Some even feared his growing influence. Alira knew these whispers would soon reach her father. She also knew that her heart was no longer free. It belonged to Daniel, the boy she had lost and the man she had found again. But what would the court say if they knew? Daniel seemed to sense her thoughts. His eyes grew serious as he looked at her. "Alira, I cannot stay long. The Empire will strike again, and I must be ready. My men need me. Your people need me too. But I will not lie. Being here with you even for one night feels like a dream I never wish to wake from." Her voice trembled. "And when you leave?" "I will return," Daniel said. "As many times as it takes. No distance, no battle, no crown can break what we share." They sat together until the moon dipped low, two souls bound by memory and hope. The princess and the soldier, once children in the fields, now faced a future filled with both danger and promise. When Daniel finally rose to leave, he bowed to her with the respect of a soldier, but his eyes spoke of something deeper. Alira watched him disappear into the shadows, her heart aching but strong. She knew the days ahead would test them both, but she also knew that some bonds were unbreakable. The war had brought him back to her, and no force in the stars could erase what they had found again. Days passed since Daniel's return to the palace, and life began to adjust to the new reality. The kingdom of Eloria remained vigilant, rebuilding defenses and preparing for possible attacks from the Empire. The people still whispered about the Starblade, praising him as a hero who had saved their homes. Yet the royal court watched him with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Some admired his courage, but others worried about a human holding such influence in a kingdom of aliens. Princess Alira felt the weight of these opinions every day. She could not hide her admiration for Daniel, nor could she ignore the feelings that had returned from their childhood. She had waited for him for so long, and now that he was here, her heart struggled between duty and desire. She knew the court would expect her to follow tradition, to choose a noble match and strengthen alliances, yet her heart spoke clearly. It belonged to Daniel. One evening, Alira found Daniel in the palace gardens. The air was warm, and the sky painted with colors of sunset. He was reviewing battle plans with his officers, but when he saw her, his attention shifted immediately. "Alira," he said quietly, his voice carrying the familiarity of old memories. "I did not expect to see you here." "I had to," she replied. "I need to speak with you, alone." He nodded, and the officers left at his gesture. They walked along the winding paths of the garden, the flowers casting soft shadows in the fading light. Alira stopped near the fountain, her hands folded nervously. "Daniel," she began, "the court will not approve of us being together. They see you only as a human soldier, no matter what you have done for Eloria." Daniel studied her face, his expression calm but serious. "I know," he said. "I have seen their doubt in their eyes. I am not a prince or noble, and yet I fought to save this kingdom. Still, that will not make them accept me as equal." Alira's heart ached at his words. "But I do not care about what they think. I care only about you. You are the one I trust, the one I waited for all these years. You are my friend, my hero, my Daniel." Daniel lowered his gaze, the burden of responsibility clear in his stance. "Alira, I feel the same. But I must be honest. My duty is to protect this kingdom. I cannot let personal feelings interfere with my role as a soldier. I must be ready if the Empire returns. I must stand for both humans and aliens alike." She stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm. "And my heart, Daniel. Is it not part of your duty to consider the lives we can build together? You risked everything for this world. Surely that includes love, courage, and hope." His eyes met hers, and for a moment silence held them both. Around them the garden was calm, the night air filled with the soft rustle of leaves. The stars above seemed to witness their struggle, shining as if urging them to follow their hearts. Finally, Daniel spoke. "Alira, if I am to lead, if I am to fight for this kingdom, I must do it with honor. But my heart is yours. I cannot hide it, and I will not. I will protect you. I will stand by your side, and I will return to you always. That is a promise no war can break." Tears welled in Alira's eyes, but they were tears of relief and joy. "Then we will face this together," she said softly. "No matter what the court says, no matter what the Empire does, we will face it as one." At that moment, the palace bells rang. A messenger arrived with urgent news. The Empire had moved closer, and scouts reported a fleet approaching the outer territories of Eloria. Daniel straightened, his mind returning to the responsibility that never left him. "I must go," he said, his voice steady. "The kingdom needs me. I cannot fail them." Alira nodded, understanding the weight of his duty. "Then go," she said, her voice strong, "and return to me. Always return." He took her hand for a brief moment, the warmth of their connection grounding them. "I will," he said firmly. "I will return to you. Whatever it takes, whatever the distance, I will return." As Daniel left, Alira watched him disappear into the shadows of the palace walls. Her heart was full, yet she knew the days ahead would be difficult. The Empire still threatened the kingdom, the court still questioned the place of a human among them, and the challenges of love and duty loomed before them both. But for the first time in many years, Alira felt certain of one truth. Her heart and Daniel's were bound together, unbroken by time, distance, or war. The princess returned to her chamber, a sense of hope and determination lighting her spirit. She would not let fear guide her decisions. She would stand for her kingdom, and she would stand for Daniel. Together they would face the empire, the court, and whatever future awaited them. For love, courage, and unity were stronger than any army, and in the heart of a princess and a hero, that strength would shine brighter than any star. The day of the grand ceremony arrived. The palace sparkled in the morning sun, banners fluttered in the wind, and the streets of Eloria were filled with people eager to witness history. Nobles, soldiers, and citizens gathered together to honor the Starblade and celebrate the kingdom's victory. The air was alive with anticipation and excitement. Princess Alira walked through the halls of the palace, her head held high. She wore a simple but elegant gown, her silver crown resting lightly on her head. Her heart pounded, for today she would speak not only for the hero who saved the kingdom, but also for the truth that had lived in her heart for years. The great hall was filled to capacity. Daniel stood at the front, his soldiers behind him, faces proud but humble. The king raised his hand, calling the hall to silence. Today, the king began, we honor the one who brought victory to Eloria, the one whose courage and skill saved our people. Let us hear from the Starblade himself. Daniel stepped forward, bowing slightly. His voice was calm and strong as he spoke of the battle, of the soldiers who fought bravely, and of the hope that had never left his heart. Yet even as he spoke, he glanced at Alira. In her eyes he saw the trust, admiration, and bond they shared. It was a silent reminder that even a hero's heart could belong to another. When Daniel finished, the hall erupted in applause. Cheers rang out and many came forward to offer thanks. But Alira knew that not everyone had accepted him fully. The nobles whispered among themselves, questioning how a human could have such influence in the kingdom. She could see the doubt in their eyes, but she also knew that words and tradition could not change the truth. She stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. All of you, she said, I ask for your attention. The hall fell silent. We honor Daniel for his bravery and skill, for the way he fought not for reward but for the safety of our kingdom. But there is more that must be known. Gasps echoed among the audience as Alira continued. Daniel is not only our hero, he was once my childhood friend, the boy who played with me in the fields, who shared dreams and laughter. He promised to return, and he has kept that promise, saving our world and returning to us stronger than ever. Daniel's eyes widened slightly, a mixture of surprise and pride crossing his face. Alira continued without pause. The court may question his place here, and the traditions may challenge him, but I declare that his courage, loyalty, and heart are what matter most. Daniel is more than a soldier. He is the friend who reminded me of hope, and the man who stands ready to protect every life in Eloria. Today I honor him not only as a hero, but as someone I trust with my heart and the future of our kingdom. The hall was silent for a moment, the words settling into every corner. Then slowly the applause began. At first quiet, then louder, until it filled the room with an overwhelming wave of support. The citizens cheered for the hero they had come to love. The soldiers saluted, their faces proud. Even some of the nobles, moved by the princess's courage, nodded in respect. Daniel stepped forward, humbled. Princess Alira, he said quietly, his voice carrying through the hall. You honor me more than any victory. I stand here not for recognition, but because I believe in Eloria and its people. I will protect this kingdom and its future with all I have, and I will honor the bond we share, as long as the stars shine above us. Alira smiled, feeling the warmth of his words. She had never doubted her heart, and now the kingdom itself witnessed the truth she had carried for so long. The king approached, placing a hand on Daniel's shoulder. You have proven your courage, your loyalty, and your honor. Today, Eloria accepts you not only as a hero, but as a part of our family, bound by trust, courage, and the future we all must protect together. Daniel bowed deeply to the king, then turned to Alira. For the first time, they stood side by side without fear, without hesitation. The past and present merged, and the bond that began in childhood was now recognized by all. As the ceremony ended, the people spilled into the garden, celebrating the victory and the promise of unity between humans and aliens. Daniel and Alira walked together among them, their hands brushing, their eyes meeting with understanding. They spoke little, for no words could match the connection that had grown stronger through years, separation, and war. That evening, under the stars, they returned to the fountain in the palace gardens. The water reflected their faces and the night was calm. Alira took Daniel's hand in hers and he held it firmly, a silent promise that no force could break. "The Empire may still return," Alira said softly, "but together we can face anything." Daniel nodded. "And together we will. Our bond is stronger than any threat. Our courage, our hope, and our hearts will guide us." The stars above shone brightly, as if celebrating the union of two friends who had grown into heroes, whose trust and love would shape the future of their world. In that moment, the princess and the soldier understood that victory was more than the battles fought. It was the truth they declared, the hearts they protected, and the hope they carried for every life in Aloria. And so, Princess Alira and Daniel the Starblade stood together, not only as hero and princess, but as two souls bound by trust, courage, and a promise kept across time and space. The kingdom rejoiced. The Empire's shadow receded for now, and the stars witnessed the beginning of a new chapter, one where love, courage, and unity shone brighter than any war could ever dim.